Today, we'll be talking a little bit about Mother's Day, both our experiences and some of our thoughts around that. And we'll also be talking a little bit about Birth Mother's Day, which happens to be the Saturday before Mother's Day. So we hope that as we bring up some of our experiences, that you might be able to relate to some. And we also hope to be able to offer some insight for you in the upcoming Birth Mother and Mother's Day. Why don't we first start with you, Sharon? Tell us a little bit about maybe some of your thoughts growing up as an adoptee around Birth Mother's Day or Mother's Day. I think Birth Mother's Day is kind of new, so I guess I'm really just curious. When Mother's Day would come around, did you have any thoughts about your birth mother as well as your adoptive mom?
You know, when I was growing up, what was present before me was always the most important thing. So the thing that was present before me was my adoptive parent. And
Mm,
so if there was any thoughts about my birth mother, it was in my subconscious because it was so far away from reality. And, in a way, I was worried more about, how do I survive this day to make it to the next day? And
mm,
so that was the primary focus. I really didn't reflect about my birth mother until I got older. I became an adult.
mm.
And I started thinking like, what happened with this lady, especially since I had a young pregnancy. That's when the thought of my birth mother really flooded my consciousness.
Yes, I've heard that before, how having children yourself definitely reawakens that.
Yes.
And Sally, I'm curious for you as an adoptive mom celebrating Mother's Day. Was there ever any moments where you were thinking about the birth mom, or did any of your children ever express some curiosity there?
I think so this would have been probably 24 years ago when I had I do remember my first couple Mother's Days and how aware I was about Mother's Day, but it was more about me at that point. Like, did I get a card or did I get some recognition? Um, rather than thinking about a birth mom,
Mm,
which as I grew up, I should say, as a mom, after like a few years of going that route in my mind and being kind of demanding, actually, especially of my husband, to think
mm,
about me or to have him help the kids, make a card for me or something like that. As I began to read more about it, I realized that it really isn't about me so much, Mother's Day. And it allowed me to let go of that because I could sense, especially with my kids, that it I think was a hard day for them. And that was why there was not a lot of interest in it.
mm.
Interestingly enough, we didn't really talk about that when they were younger. Although we did light a candle, I just remembered that. We lit a candle for their birth moms on Mother's
Oh,
Day. We did do that. And we thought about it then. So I did, isn't that funny? I think more about the things that I didn't do, but we did do that.
I love
And
that.
then
That's a really nice
yeah,
practice.
and allowed them to share some things. But then as the years went on, I realized that it's a Hallmark holiday that puts a lot of pressure on everybody. And so
Mhm.
we're pretty low key now about Mother's Day.
Mm. Yeah, you're right about that pressure. I think for me, a lot of the recollection of Mother's Day came sometimes inadvertently through some of the church, not realizing that some ways that they wanted to honor moms caused a lot of grief for some. I remember will the moms with 5 kids stand up? Or will the moms with them, and then they would try to see, who has the most kids in a fun way. But I remember like it always raised this question, like, how many kids do I say I have? Same thing, when you'd go to the doctor, how many children do you have? And Mother's Day was definitely one of those holidays that awoke in me this feeling like I wasn't being authentic, because a big part of my personality is authenticity. So this feeling of like, well, how many kids do I have and what do I say here? And also seeing how painful it was for moms that were infertile. again, I don't think we realize that sometimes, the questions we ask can bring up a whole bunch of stuff for other people, and their stories around titles or days such as Mother's Day.
Hmm. I was thinking of the thing I think that prefaced my whole thought about Mother's Day, or not thinking about my birth mother, is the fact that I was in a closed adoption. So,
Mm,
it was just explained to me that when growing up, that I was a product of two people, and that there was someone else, but it was never developed. The idea wasn't developed any further than that. And so my reality became just day to day interaction. When Mother's Day came, we had to, there was a sort of gratitude that surfaced the consciousness of all the kids to say, thank you, Mom. And we honored Mom in the way that we felt that she should be honored. And I'm sort of thankful for that because I had a chance to really acknowledge her and the work she did to bring us up and everything. She was a good mother. But now I realize my attitude towards Mother's Day really prefaced for how my children treat me.
mm.
So it
And
was
what a
like,
great
yeah,
distinction there that it was a day to honor her for just that,
yes,
being that role.
yes, yes, it was. And it helped that my attitude helped my kids have the same attitude, towards me. And I'm thankful every day. They're just beautiful in terms of respecting me and understanding who I am and what I went through to, get them here. And um, you know, I just, now that I'm older and recognize who my birth mother actually was, and I didn't get a chance to meet her or know her, but I do know that she would not have practiced in a Mother's Day because of her religion. So
Mm,
she wouldn't have honored that day or thought anything about that day. It would have just been another day on the calendar, So I think that idea or understanding that about her kind of gave me um relief, you
yeah,
know.
I appreciate that. It would
Yeah,
relieve the pressure there.
yeah.
That's interesting because I think sometimes I don't know how much I can ask of my kids to acknowledge my mothering
Mm,
because I feel like if I do it too much, I will be negating and not thinking about um, that they do have another mother and that this arrival into our home came through a lot of pain and with for a lot of people. And so sometimes I wonder if I didn't ask enough of it too. Like from
mm,
what you're just saying, Sharon, right?
mm,
So it's like, have I sort of not asked that? Because then what will they practice when they get when their kids come, and will their kids honor that? I feel like if I had birthed my kids, I would have been more teaching them how to acknowledge people on special days.
mm.
And I don't think I have done that so much.
That's a great insight there. I think for me, having both parented and placed, I came to a little bit more freedom and lightness around the holiday because I realized that like a lot of people are struggling with the whole mother wound issue. There's this place where you first blame everything on, either being the birth mom or the adopted mom. And then there comes this reality that people struggle with the whole mom thing because really we grow just like they grow. Like we grow into our roles. There's no parent that has, a book on how to do this. We go out there and we set out, to do, but sometimes if there is a reason to blame aside from us, we can do that. And I think for me, I felt a lot of freedom in recognizing that in both the children I parented and placed, life has its struggles. We're human, we make our mistakes both ways. So it took away a lot of the shame and guilt that might have been associated one way versus the other for me.
Hmm. Yeah, becoming an adoption coach, I remember the first blog I wrote was on Mother's Day, and it was a note to my unknown mother at the time, saying that I forgive her, you know,
Mm,
for her decision. Um, and then later on, after I found out who she was and began to know her children, and learned that I was a secret to them too. No one knew of my who I was or where I came from or anything. So,
Mm,
but on her deathbed, when she was beginning to die and lose life, um, her daughter said to her mom, your children love you. And so then she said, well, I love all of my children.
mm,
So that was
mm,
like, oh, it hit me hard, because it was kind of like a thing that made me think about, her life and what she struggled with. And so then it became paramount to me to begin to understand who this lady was.
mm. And that makes me think of, as a society, we tried to honor the birth mom as we became more into awareness and adoption became more of a thing that we have this birth Mother's Day. And in the community, there's a real divide between moms who think this is really sweet and special and moms who feel that it's almost offensive to have a separate day. And as you shared that your mom said, I loved all of my children, and as a mom, this birth mom, sometimes we do things, because we think that maybe by giving a distinction, we're helping to maybe just clarify the distinction in the role. But overall, I think a mom is a mom, and we make the best decision for our child despite or under those same circumstances. So I think for me, like as you said that, it brought up just about why maybe it can be a little bit offsetting for some people to have a separate day other than, Mother's Day.
So you're
Have
saying it's upsetting to, you're saying two camps within the
birth
birth
moms.
parent community.
Yes,
Okay.
some do not see that as an honor. They see that distinction,
Mhm.
they would rather not have a separate day for it
Mhm.
Hmm.
Yeah, because that
because
separate
it's
day maybe could imply that it's not, what would the word be?
not the same role,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
different title, same role.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
I had
Mm.
really never thought of it like that before.
And even greeting cards, like you don't realize the things that are going to bring stuff up, but it's like I remember, like even just how do I sign a card? Am I birth mom? Am I mom? Am I by my name? These titles come in so much in the adoption experience, and really cause a lot of confusion because you're not sure where you stand within the roles. And they've created some nice cards that are more adoption geared, but I still think we have a ways to come of recognizing that, how hard it can be sometimes to come into grips with who you are, in this environment.
Would you say that open adoption might help that a little bit? Because I'm thinking like in our family, we don't say birth mom, we just say mom. And just like you have two Bobs in your life, maybe that
Right.
have whole different meanings. Our kids know when we're talking about me or when we're talking about their mom, their other
Mm,
mom. And so it and then so having their mothers know that,
mm,
I would think in an open adoption would be like maybe helpful or not, that what's happened, how is the adopted family talking about, or what language are they using to include the first mother, the birth mother.
mm. Very good points, and also makes me think of how much we struggle with identity, especially in the adoption environment. And
Mhm.
some of that comes into play because of these titles and roles that we don't yet really know how to walk around.
Mhm.
No, as you were talking about how some birth mothers really don't like the distinction and don't want to have the special day, I'm just thinking how much grief and everything is associated with the role of being a birth mother and having to give up your child. And do I want to be recognized for that? You
Mm,
know, it's so
yeah.
I was thinking like, oh my gosh, I hadn't even heard of the concept of Birth Mother's Day. I'm glad you brought it to my consciousness because I didn't know anything about it.
Yes, and it's funny because I was invited to a breakfast again, and sometimes I've gone in the role of a speaker, And that's always felt okay. And just to go as an attendee brought up again a lot of the identity and role thing. Like, who am I today? I feel like we're in reunion, and there's this place around, am I still the birth mom? Like, it's such a strange dynamic because yes, theoretically I am, but there's almost like I feel a settling of being mom now, that we're reconnected and established. I recognize I'm another mom in his life, but I don't really feel such a harsh contrast anymore. And I
Mm,
thought, wow, that's an interesting place to be, even within my own community.
wow.
Yeah, I think too, like of birth mothers who had children who it was a forced separation, so termination of parental rights by the court,
Yeah.
or other really painful experiences. I think overseas, perhaps, or even here, where maybe it was not a willful placement, or even just sort of circumstance that puts a person in that situation where they feel they must place. I know of some people where back in the day, it was more the parents who decided, because the
Mm.
child was very young, and and they said no, your child will be placed. And that's all of those kinds of experiences around it too.
Such a good point. They don't have the ability to properly grieve that, like they would have to if they placed or made a decision out of choice.
Hmm.
Mhm. Mhm.
Well, I know that my mother placed me because of some negative things that were going on in the home. And so she felt that, even though it was being raised in a different home, for her, placing me was actually the best option.
Mhm.
And as we move into thinking about like today, like how has our thinking today been changed, and how do we show up differently today? I think for me, it's a real, I think, awareness of being very gentle in how I maybe wish someone a happy Mother's Day before I have information. Recognizing that there is a mother wound present for a lot of people, a lot of us moms, whether we placed or parented. We made some mistakes along the way, and sometimes we don't think we're worthy of, the title or the celebration. And I think my encouragement is that this is one title you don't have to work for. You're mom, and you need to just step into that role and really embrace and recognize your huge value, both as an adoptive mom and as a birth mom. Just being that cheerleader in the life of our children, and having people that really, really love and care for them to the capacity that a mom role does, I think has helped me a lot to be just a little more careful and gentler in how I maybe, approach the day with others. How about you both? How has maybe some of your thinking today been shaped from those experiences that you shared?
I think I sort of carry the flag of motherhood only because I had my own children, and when I was faced with the concept of either raising my son or giving him away for adoption because it was a young pregnancy and I wasn't married, um, it's sort of like it's like a badge of honor or something. I don't know. For me personally, I feel like um, you know, I gave my situation, my life, and everything else full circle, and decided to take on this motherhood role. And I believe in honoring anyone who takes that on, whether it's if it was a chance to opt to take it on, or whether they had to make a choice or a decision to adopt, or maybe even if they went through the whole process and only had miscarriages. I mean, whatever it is, people should enjoy, I think, and bask in the fact that motherhood is a huge responsibility, and at the same time deserve to have some kudos.
Yeah, that's a big, deep question, Kim.
I know.
Um, I would say that for me, looking now, it's more like taking the long view. Like what with my kids and even myself, like it can ebb and flow. Some years I can get a recognition on Mother's Day, sometimes not. So for me, I've released the expectation of the day and realized that, yeah, that it can come and go. And I'm still a mom. I can tell I'm still important in their life. And I don't need that day as much. And I feel the same way, Kim, that you feel, like in public arenas, like a church, for instance, when it's recognized, it can be more harmful than good. And so for me, that s- the context of saying Happy Mother's Day, it needs to be in relationship with people. So we know if that is something that would be helpful or not helpful, versus sort of this blanket, Happy Mother's Day.
Yeah, I don't think there's many opportunities that we get to vocalize some of our feelings around this. So I think this was such a great conversation, just a starter of a conversation around, titles and what can be wrapped up within these titles and expectations of society. And I think there's so much more that we can dive into here, but this was a really great starter conversation. And especially as we move in, to Mother's Day and Birth Mother's Day in the upcoming weeks.
Thanks, Kim, for hosting this.
Yes,
Thank
thanks,
you.
Kim.
This was great.